What if we told you that the biggest surprises coming our way, well, maybe they aren't surprises at all, patterns repeating themselves from centuries ago? Welcome, everyone. We're digging into Ray Dalio's work, specifically his principles for dealing with the changing world order. Our mission today is basically to cut through all that complexity, pull out the core ideas, and help you understand these, well, huge forces shaping global power, wealth, even conflict.
And what it might mean for the future.
Dalio, he learned this the hard way. It hadn't happened in his lifetime, sure, but it had happened loads of times over the last, 500 years?
Yeah, consistently leading to these big shifts in world order.
And that's his core thing. Understanding the past is, well, kind of the key to maybe anticipating the future.
Absolutely. And his own journey to figuring this out started with a really eye-opening moment for him personally.
Okay, so picture this. 1971, Dalio's on the NYSE floor. And the U.S., it sounds crazy now, but it had basically run out of gold.
Real money, as he calls it.
Real money, yeah. Back then, gold was, what countries actually used for big international stuff. Paper money, the dollar. It's just a promise, like a check.
Uh-huh. A claim check for gold.
No value on its own, just the guarantee you could swap it for gold. But the U.S. was spending way more than it earned, writing tons of these dollar checks.
More checks than gold in the vault.
Right. So people started rushing to cash in their dollars for gold, and the U.S. gold pile just vanished fast. The promise was right on the edge of break-in.
It was a genuine crisis moment. And then, that Sunday evening, August 15th, President Nixon gets on TV and announces the U.S. is, quote, temporarily suspending the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Very diplomatic language.
Yeah.
But effectively, the U.S. just broke its promise. Defaulted, really. Nixon said, the strength of a nation's currency is based on the strength of that nation's economy. I have directed Secretary Connolly to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold.
Okay, and this is the kicker. Dalio, he's expecting total chaos on Monday morning, right? Market Armageddon.
He braced himself.
But the opening bell rings, and the market, it doesn't crash. It goes up.
Skyrockets, yeah.
Yeah.
Up nearly 25%. He was totally floored.
Because he'd never seen a currency devaluation like that before. So he hits the history books.
This is what's so wild. He finds the exact same scenario played out back in 1933.
Under Roosevelt.
Under Roosevelt, same situation. Dollars linked to gold, U.S. running out of gold. Roosevelt makes a similar announcement, breaks the promise. Remember the bank holiday? Quote, it was then that I issued the proclamation providing for the national bank holiday.
So same playbook, basically.
Pretty much. In both cases, breaking the gold link meant the government could just print more money, keep spending.
Right, more paper dollars chasing the same amount of actual stuff.
Exactly. So the value of each dollar drops, devaluation. And where does all that new money go?
Into assets.
You got it. Stocks, gold, commodities. Their prices went up because there was more money sloshing around. And that gave Dalio his principle. When central banks print a lot of money to relieve a crisis, buy stocks, gold, and commodities because their value will rise and the value of paper money will fall. Happened again in 2008, the mortgage crisis, and again in 2020 with the pandemic response. Massive money printing both times. Dalio thinks it's almost certain to happen again in the future.
It led him to look at bigger cycles, like the Roaring '20s turning into the Depression.
Exactly. And understanding that cycle helped him foresee the 2007 housing bubble turning into the 2008 crash.
History doesn't repeat, maybe, but it definitely rhymes.
That's the core idea.
So what were the big things happening now, or when he started this big study that made him think, okay, these haven't all hit at once in my lifetime?
Right. So he saw three huge global trends kind of converging. First, just massive debt. Countries basically don't have enough money to pay what they owe.
Even with interest rates near zero.
Even then. So central banks are just printing incredible amounts of money. That's number one.
Okay.
Second, big internal conflicts. You see growing gaps, not just in wealth, but in values too.
Leading to political polarization.
Yeah, political populism, often, one side wanting to redistribute wealth, the other wanting to defend it, that kind of tension.
And the third?
Increasing external conflict. Specifically, a rising great power challenging the current leading power.
Like China and the U.S. today.
That's the clearest example right now, yeah.
So debt, internal splits, external challenges. He saw these three things coming together and realized, wait a minute, this combination, it's happened before, many times.
Exactly. And nearly every time, it led to a fundamental change in how things were run, both inside countries and between them. A change in the order.
Okay, define order in Dalio's terms. What does that actually mean?
An order is just the governing system. how people or countries deal with each other. You've got internal orders, rules within a country, usually set out in things like constitutions.
Like the Constitution after the Revolution, or Russia in 1917, China in 1949.
Precisely. Those set the internal rules. Then you have world orders, rules between countries, often laid out in treaties after major wars.
Like the current one, the American World Order, set up after World War II.
Exactly. U.S. is the dominant power.
And how do these orders typically change?
Usually after big conflicts. Civil wars change internal orders. International wars change the world order. Basically, Dalia says, revolutionary new forces defeat weak old orders.
And that idea of the reserve currency seems like a massive advantage.
It absolutely is a huge source of power. And these changes, these rises and falls, they happen within what Dalio calls the big cycle.
The big cycle. Okay.
It's this timeless universal pattern he saw looking at the 10 most powerful empires over the last 500 years and the 3 major reserve currencies.
The Dutch guilder, the British pound, the U.S. dollar.
Right. And he's also studied China's rise. These cycles overlap, he found, and they last roughly 250 years each.
With transition periods.
Yeah, these really critical 10 to 20-year transition periods between cycles. And those are often marked by, well, great conflict, because leading powers, as he says, don't decline without a fight. There are 8 key measures of power he tracks.
We know the obvious ones, like military strength, economic output, but what are maybe 1 or 2 of the less obvious he looks at?
He really stresses education right at the start, not just skills, but character, civility, and also inventiveness and technology development.
So the brain power and innovation.
Yeah, he sees those as the absolute bedrock, what kicks off the rise before a country even gets militarily dominant, along with competitiveness, trade share, financial center strength, and that all-important reserve currency status.
Tracking these lets you see if a country's rising or falling, basically.
Exactly. It gives you a dashboard to see how the typical cycle plays out, the cause and effect driving the rise, the top, and the decline.
Okay, so let's walk through that typical cycle using his framework. How does an empire usually rise?
Okay, the rise phase usually kicks off after a big conflict settles things, establishes a new leader, a new order. Then comes peace, prosperity.
You need strong leadership at the start.
Definitely. Powerful, often revolutionary leaders who win power, set up good systems, pick good successors, and they build on strong foundations. Good education, like we said, teaching knowledge, skills, character, work ethic, low corruption, unity. That's key.
And that fuels innovation.
Right. The country moves from basic stuff to inventing new tech. Think of the Dutch back in their day, inventing like a quarter of the world's major innovations, including modern capitalism. This boosts productivity, competitiveness, they grab more world trade. Then comes the military strength to protect those trade routes. And they usually embrace a capitalist approach to unleash entrepreneurs.
Like Deng Xiaoping in China saying, it's glorious to be rich.
Exactly. Get people motivated. And crucially, they build robust capital markets, lending, bonds, stocks to fund all this.
That's where financial centers emerge, like Amsterdam, London, New York.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The Dutch created the first public company, the Dutch East India Company, the first stock market. And importantly, the capitalists, the government, and the military have to work together.
Like the Dutch East India Company having its own army and government backing.
Yes, or the British East India Company, the U.S. military-industrial complex, the Chinese system today. It's a coordinated effort. And eventually, as they dominate trade, their currency becomes the go-to globally.
The reserve currency.
The reserve currency. That gives them the exorbitant privilege. They can borrow more, print more money when needed, but that also leads to more borrowing. And that's where the seeds of the first financial bubble start. It's a remarkably consistent path.
Okay, so the empire reaches the top. They're dominant, prosperous, but you said the seeds of decline are sown then. How does that actually start? What are the first cracks?
Well, while things look great on the surface, subtle shifts begin. People in the rich countries start earning way more. They become expensive, less competitive.
Other countries can make things cheaper?
Yeah, other nations start copying their tech and methods, often using cheaper labor. Think of the British eventually building better ships than the Dutch by hiring Dutch designers but using less expensive British workers.
Interesting. What about internally?
The work ethic can soften. People enjoy the good life, maybe work less hard, focus more on leisure. Values can shift too, from the generations who fought to build the wealth to those who just inherit it. Dalio says they become less battle-hardened, steeped in luxuries, and accustomed to the easy life.
The Dutch Golden Era, the British Victorian Era.
Exactly. And financially, people bet on the good times continuing. More borrowing, bigger financial bubbles, wealth gaps widen, often dramatically. The rich can use their influence to protect their position, which breeds resentment.
But that resentment doesn't always cause immediate problems.
Not usually, as long as overall living standards are still rising for most people. The problems really start when the pie stops growing or shrinks.
And that reserve currency of privilege, it starts to bite back.
It becomes a double-edged sword, yeah. It encourages the country to borrow way too much, piling up huge foreign debts. Great for short-term spending, terrible for long-term financial health.
The empire gets expensive to maintain.
Domestic spending, military adventures. It costs more than the empire brings in. Dalio mentions the U.S. spending something like $8 trillion on foreign wars just since 9/11.
Wow.
And eventually, the rich country starts borrowing from poorer countries that save more, like the U.S. borrowing from China since the 80s, or the British and Dutch borrowing from their colonies way back.
And if those lenders start getting nervous...
Then faith in the currency starts to wobble. That's a really dangerous sign.
Okay, so that leads us into the decline. The cracks are showing, the debts are huge. What happens when things really start to unravel?
The decline often comes slowly at first, then picks up speed fast. It's usually triggered by internal economic weakness, or intense internal fighting, or a really costly external war, or often all three.
Then the debt becomes unsustainable.
Debts are massive, maybe an economic downturn hits, the country can't borrow anymore, the bubble bursts, now they face a choice.
Yeah.
Default, or print tons of money.
And they always choose printing.
Almost invariably, Dalio says. It devalues the currency, causes inflation, but it avoids an immediate, messy default. Think of the British pound getting hammered after World War II.
And that economic pain must just pour fuel on the internal fires, right?
Absolutely. When the government can't pay its bills, the economy tanks. Living standards fall. That's when the internal conflicts, rich versus poor, different ethnic or political groups explode.
You get extremism, populism.
Definitely. Political extremes rise on both left and right. Left wanting redistribution, right wanting to defend wealth. It gets nasty. Taxes on the rich might go way up.
So the rich try to leave or move their money.
They often do, looking for safer havens. That drains tax revenue, hollows out the economy even more. Governments might even try to ban capital flight. Productivity tanks, the economic pie shrinks, and the fights over the remaining pieces get worse. Populist leaders promising easy answers often gain traction. Democracy itself gets challenged. People might look for a strong leader, even an authoritarian one, just to restore order.
And this can lead to actual revolution.
It often does. Some kind of revolution or civil war to force a redistribution of wealth. Could be relatively peaceful, like he argues Roosevelt's New Deal was a kind of peaceful revolution, or violent, like the French, Russian, or Chinese revolutions. And all this internal weakness makes the empire incredibly vulnerable externally.
To those rising rivals.
Exactly. If a rival power has built up its strength, especially military strength, the risk of international war goes way up. The declining power faces that awful choice. Fight a war it might lose, or retreat and cede influence.
Losing is worst, but retreating is bad too.
It's a terrible bind. Wars are destructive, but they do end up realigning the world order to match the new power realities.
And the cycle ends when?
The cycle really ends when everyone holding the declining empire's currency in debt finally loses faith. They sell it off en masse. That forces absolutely massive money printing. Hyperinflation maybe, the currency becomes irrelevant. Dalio points out, of maybe 750 currencies around since 1700, less than 20% still exist, and every single one has been devalued.
So, bringing it back to today, connecting this big cycle picture, where does Dalio place the U.S. right now? Is it decline? Is reversal possible? It sounds so deterministic.
Well, he's careful. He says the U.S. hasn't hit that big sell-off point for the dollar yet, but he clearly states it does have massive debt, spends more than it earns, and funds this deficit with more borrowing and printing huge amounts of new money.
And the conflicts.
And he acknowledges the great internal and external conflicts are there, but crucially haven't yet crossed the line to become wars. As for reversing decline, he says it's really, really hard.
Because you have to undo so much momentum.
Right. But it is possible.
What's the path back, according to Dalio?
He uses an analogy of, like, human health. An empire's lifespan, its cycle, can be stretched if its leaders really pay attention to their vital signs and improve them.
Those 8 metrics we talked about earlier.
Those are the vital signs. They show how fit the country is, whether its condition is getting better or worse. Right. And he boils down what's needed for success, for reversing decline, into 2 core principles: Really simple on the surface.
Okay.
First, earn more than you spend as a country,
Get the finances in order.
fundamentally.
Mm-hmm.
And second, treat each other well.
Reduce the internal conflict.
Exactly. He says basically everything else, education, innovation, competitiveness, all of it. They're just ways to achieve those two things. Earn more than you spend, treat each other well. We can look at the vital signs individually and as a country and decide if we want to get healthier.
That's a powerful way to frame it after all that historical complexity. A simple focus, this whole deep dive, it really helps, like Dalio wants, to see where we might be, the challenges ahead, and hopefully helps you listening, think about making wiser choices.
It certainly gives you a different lens to view current events through.
And that final thought from Dalio really sticks with you. It's most often the case that a nation's greatest war is with itself, over whether or not it can make the hard decisions needed to sustain success.
Powerful stuff. And if you want to go deeper, the book itself, Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order, is fascinating. Plus his website, economicprinciples.org, has a ton of data and videos.
Highly recommended. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Until next time.